My name's Kevin. I'm a PM over at Jet Protocol, and so my background is in electrical and computer engineering. I did a little software for a short time after school. I did some hardware automation engineering in factories around the States. And then I took kind of a non-traditional route, and I followed a childhood dream, taught some English abroad for a few years in Spain, Vietnam, and Nepal. And so on the crypto side, if anyone remembers Stumble Upon, I first stumbled upon into Bitcoin back in 2011 and was like, this is neat. Kind of kept up with it on and off, and I was a broke college kid at that moment, working in a cafeteria. So I was just kind of reading about it, and once I graduated from school, right around the time Ethereum came out, that was where I kind of tuned back in, and Ethereum just, as the creator of smart contracts, kind of blew my mind at the time. And so from there, I was pretty hooked. And I had this a great time teaching abroad. It gave me, basically, I was able to tie this all together, the technical past and the teaching, into getting a crypto job about 5-6 months ago at Jet. So it's been awesome, really cool industry to work in. You have a lot of ways you can help out, a lot of creative agency, and it's the teaching background has kind of allowed me to coach some of our developers who aren't necessarily, they don't come from a crypto background. It's been a really cool way for me to tie it all together. All right, there we go, gotcha. So I want to tell you guys a bit about how we use oracles over at Jet. And so we have a borrowing and lending application, a lot going on behind the scenes. So I'll give you guys kind of an overview of where Jet came from, where we're at, our philosophy, where we're going, and then I'll kind of tie Pyth into things and about how we use Pyth and why we chose Pyth, as well as for a short time we considered using multiple oracles, and why we decided to not do that in the end, and just we're real happy with our choice. So Jet started from a hackathon submission from one of our co-founders in early 2021. And it was, there's two co-founders, James and Will. Both of them were colleagues over at Consensus, which is kind of like a software incubator for Ethereum-based projects. And so my point in mentioning this is that both of them kind of have a nice long crypto history. Will was on the more technical side, working as a Solidity dev at Consensus as well as at MakerDAO, which, if you're not aware, MakerDAO was kind of the first real killer DApp of any smart contract platform. It allowed you to lock up your Ethereum and mint DAI, a stablecoin worth $1 up to a certain collateral ratio. And when I checked last night, I think there was over $9 billion worth of DAI on the network. So this is kind of a real monolith in the crypto industry. So Will kind of covers the technical side of the co-founding, and James worked at MetaMask, which is like the biggest Ethereum wallet. He worked at Infura, at Blockdaemon, and Consensus as well. So he was kind of more on the infrastructure side. He's got a lot of industry contacts, and he's more of now fulfilling a community building role and really helping to flesh out the governance side of things, which I'll briefly mention as well. So the philosophy behind everything is that, as we all know, I think, debt is kind of a worldwide driver and an incredibly useful tool, right? There's kind of this conception about debt being a bad thing, and maybe for some individuals it is, but certainly it's unarguable that this is an incredibly useful tool on a larger scale. So we are moving. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. When I was hired on, I was the 10th person about 5.5 months ago. We just hired our 23rd. So there's a ton going on in the background, and we are going to move more deeply into debt markets. I'll briefly mention kind of what I'm talking about there without being too explicit. And just in general, we expect to see more complex financial instruments and primitives ending up on the blockchain, especially this year. A lot of stuff is going on, especially on Solana, which is really cool. And so in a way, a bet on Jet is kind of a focused bet that DeFi and the tech underpinning it will become a critical piece of infrastructure in the TradFi world, kind of emerging. And we do feel this way pretty strongly. So a bit more on that in a moment. But I want to show you just an easy screenshot of basically if you go to our application right at this moment, this is what it looks like. As you can see, we only have 4 assets. For our MVP, which was released in October, we chose just kind of 4 blue chips that have tons of liquidity on chain. We're a borrowing and lending market, and we do all of our liquidations on chain to Serum, actually. So the amount of liquidity on an asset basis is super important, obviously. And so it looks like not much is going on the front. So we've got a lot going on in the back, and also I've been able to help a lot with engaging users on our Discord and our forums, and like kind of building out little sub features here and there that people wanted. So it's been real cool. And I want to just really briefly, for anyone who doesn't know, go over what like our borrowing and lending application uses the same model as some of the real big ones on Ethereum, which have tens of billions of value locked into them. I'm speaking about Aave or Compound, if you're aware of them. So this is a lending pool model where everything is over-collateralized because there's no recourse for you to get. And obviously, this is not very capital efficient, right? So this is something that we're really working on improving. But in this model, essentially everything runs from the rates are determined by a utilization curve. And so, I took this from an Ethereum application because I like the way that they visualize it on the app, where it shows you the current utilization. You can kind of hover your mouse over the curve to see what the rates would be at a certain point. And so when we came out with the MVP, we have a guy that we work with, really great guy, who is he's a theoretical physics PhD. So he really loves to get into these kind of like model building scenarios and all this. And we looked at the competitive landscape on Solana at the moment, and so we tried to innovate by coming up with a slightly more advantageous interest rate curve. We added a third segment. You can see the red curve there is our interest rate curve compared to the other borrowing lending markets on Solana. And so with all things being held equal, essentially, we would offer tighter spreads, which offers better rates for lenders and borrowers. Nonetheless, moving forward, like I said, we do want to get away from this pooled lending model, which is just suboptimal for a number of reasons, especially when it comes to dealing with institutions from our research. So the rates are unpredictable. As a borrower, you have to babysit your position. As a lender, you have predictability in your rates. We've had some institutions talk about how they cannot even enter pools because they're counterfeiting. They're mixing funds with potentially, there's no traceability essentially. So it's a really cool model, but there are definitely some improvements to be made that we're excited to be working on. And so kind of our sort of vague, without me being too explicit, roadmap that I can say is that we're going to push some crypto standards like I'm hinting at. Our V2 is very institutional focused, and we're kind of leaning on some partners already have in building some of this stuff. We want to maximize capital efficiency on chain. We want to offer alternatives to lending pools. So that our lending pool, our current app, will become a subset of what we're working on. We want to have market-based interest rates with more term structure, as I just mentioned. And like I said, we liquidate to Serum, which is super cool, but we want to kind of continue to lean on Serum as it's a central limit order book is familiar for institutions. So we want to kind of help with building out this infrastructure for them to use as easily as possible. Improved cross-margining is, without saying too much, one that's going to be really sweet, what we're working on. Partnerships with custodial services for the custodianship, helping institutions get their toes wet into DeFi. And the end goal is kind of to just help move the balance sheet on chain, right? Like, especially on Solana, you can kind of envision with what Bartosz is talking about, and like you can kind of see in a year or two, you can imagine where we might be, maybe less, maybe 6 months. And then honorable mention, less financially related, but just because I've been spending a lot of time on it in the last few weeks, we're about to release our governance module, which will allow our community members to vote. We've had lots of applications for new collateral types, for instance, but we don't want to kind of make any big changes without having our community, giving them a voice and allowing them to help steer. So this will be coming out in a matter of weeks, along with the ability to stake JET tokens and earn a chunk of protocol revenue by doing so. So kind of the best of the DeFi world, and hopefully the best of the TradFi world coming soon. So to tie it back to Pyth, why do we rely on oracles at JET? This is fairly obvious, right? As a borrower and lender, we need to make sure that we don't have any bad debt. That's paramount. We need to liquidate positions when we need to. And as everyone I think has heard, crypto assets have a famed volatility, so this is kind of our #1 priority when designing everything. Something that we use on our application is Pyth's confidence interval, which so we compare the interval of the asset to the hourly TWAP, and we have a threshold of 5%. If it exceeds that threshold, then we reject the price and we pause liquidations for the moment. As I'll say again in a moment, the confidence interval was something that we all thought was really a really cool innovation by Pyth. It's been really sweet to hear you guys go through the white paper yesterday. That was a really nice talk. Really enjoyed it. The Slack was buzzing at the same time with the release of the white paper. So, yeah. And this is, we don't rely on an oracle for this, but I just wanted to re-mention that sufficient on-chain liquidity is kind of our other must-have, right? We get applications from some assets where they have like 150 grand of on-chain liquidity, and we have to tell them you need more of this, and also we have to go through governance, but you guys need more liquidity, and some of them actually with that feedback have been they kind of didn't realize it, and so they said they would work on it, work on getting more incentive programs to get more of the liquidity on chain, and we hope to be able to list. One of the ones we had on our forums was a Euro stablecoin, which is kind of cool. They haven't really taken off in DeFi, so it would be cool to get a Euro stablecoin going as well. So why did we choose Pyth as our oracle? It had great architecture from our perspective. Some of this stuff I'm going over is kind of elementary after several days of Pyth talks, so forgive me, I didn't know in advance. but yeah, so the multiple data sources is a big one, right? Coming from market makers, coming from trading firms, coming from crypto exchanges, and they all publish on chain. Pyth has this really cool aggregation model, which we heard about in depth yesterday. And what else is neat is that we can choose to emphasize or de-emphasize specific data publishers. Perhaps if the confidence interval gets too wide, we can go and decide, okay, we know that these guys are going to have a good price, so we can go with them, even though the confidence interval of the aggregate is very wide. Additionally, we wanted to support the Solana ecosystem rather than just working with an oracle that moved over from Ethereum. And my teammates told me that everyone at Pyth has been really great to work with the whole time, friendly, responsive, and yeah, I'd say it seemed the same to me this week. So real briefly, I'll go over the confidence intervals. Basically, like I said, it's a bit elementary now, guys, after yesterday, sorry. But if we have a wide interval, we have low confidence, right? As I said, we can defer to a single, more trusted data source, or we can use that singular data point, or we can trust Pyth, which, as we heard, Pyth has put a lot of thought into how they aggregate that data. So it's kind of nice to have the option, essentially. With a narrow interval, that means a high confidence, all's well. Oh, and just wanted to point out that if you guys should check out the Pyth website and click around, explore some of the data sets they have. It's really well presented. Their Medium blog as well is just well written. I really liked going through it when I was building this. And so finally, I just want to have a tiny little case study to show kind of what we're thinking about when we use oracle prices. So if we look at Solana as an asset, this is about a minute and a half time scale here, live data straight from the Pyth website. And you can see even this is the confidence interval plus minus here. Of course, it's mirrored, and it's very smooth, right? The confidence is about 8 cents on an asset, which is in the 140s in prices. So this is it's very trustworthy data. We can see that this extends to, here's the crypto famed volatility, right? This is a one-day chart of Solana that I took last week. And we can see that it's a good-looking graph. Even with the confidence interval, it's narrow enough that we can basically look at this as almost a singular point. It's very reliable. And we can see that on their website as well, also very well laid out, guys. We can see that they have a total of 18 price components. On the left, you can see that one of them is down, so there's 17 quotas, which their minimum, as they mentioned, was 3. This is why you've got such a nice, smooth line there, right? I wanted to contrast this with, I like Orca. We were talking about maybe liquidating to them at times too, so this is not a knock on Orca at all. But Orca, this is also a couple minutes of chart here, and their price is hovering in the 340 range with a confidence of 4 cents, which is a little over 1%. And you can see that it's just a rougher graph on that live chart, and you can also see that this translates to having less confidence on the daily chart, et cetera. So this is just kind of the stuff we think about when we're talking about listing more assets along with liquidity. And here we can see the reason for that. They only have 4 quotas at the moment. So we can, of course, expect all these things to get better over time. And it's not like I'm not calling out Orca at all. I'm just trying to show you an example of confidence interval differences. So lastly, we talked for a bit internally about should we switch between oracles? How can we make sure that we're using the best data possible? And in the end, we decided to just go singularly with Pyth. And so why? Pyth, like I keep saying, did all this amazing work in a well-thought-out aggregation model for their data. And for us to get into this, it would drain so much resources. It's not as simple as it might sound. To get into it would introduce a bunch of new attack vectors and be a real drain on our engineering resources. So we prefer to keep working on the new products with that, and we're happy to lean on Pyth and continue growing with them in this ecosystem. So that is my talk. Thank you guys very much for your time. Really great to be here. And if you have any questions, please ask, and would love to chat after any time. So thanks, guys.